צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יסגה. שתולים בבית השם, בחצרות אלוקינו יפריחו, עוד ינובון בשיבה. דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר השם צורי ולא עוולת בוין. nay na na nay na nay nay na na nay na nay uloy na na nay na nay nay na na nay na nay צדיק כתמר רפא כארז בלבנון יסגן צדיק כתמר רפא כארז בלבנון יסגן שתולים בבית השם בחצרות אלוקינו יפריחו עוד ינובון בשיבה שנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד כי ישר השם צורי ולא עוולה תבוא נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי נאי נא נא נאי נא נאי
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Okay. All right, let's just cut the music there. Okay, welcome everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Shabbat Torah study. My name is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, as I'm sure you all know by now. Let's just start with a sound check. Can you guys hear me? Somebody give me a yes if you can hear me, just so I know that we're going out over the air to the millions and millions of people listening. Somebody, hello, can you guys hear me? Somebody just type in yes, let me know. Hello, okay, very good. Okay, I've got to plug in my computer again. I'm in a different position in the house in my never-ending attempt to find some peace and quiet in the house, so we'll see if this works out today. And I guess, well, actually, I've got to plug in, so I should do that right now. You guys just bear with me for 1 second. 1 sec. Okay. All right. Let me just plug in for 1 second here. Let's see. We need that. We need that. So otherwise, the battery is going to go dead on the computer. That'll be the end of that. Okay. Let's see. Let's get it on there. Yeah, I should always plug in before I thanks for the advice, Yoshi Ben. You know, by profession, I'm a technology guy, so I should know that, right? But, you know, there's a famous statement, famous hold on a second. No, that's not gonna work. Hold on 1 second here. I gotta get an extension for it. There's a famous expression in modern Hebrew, "Ben sandalar holech yachef," which means the sandal maker's or the shoemaker's son walks around barefoot. You can figure out the relevance in a second while I go get an extension cord. 1 second. All right, here's an extension cord. It makes life a little bit better. I work in technology, but I actually hate technology. It's a big pain in the ass, if you ask me. All right, this goes in the wall. That's on. This goes in here. This goes in here. All right, that should be good. That's better. And this goes in here. And the excitement of watching me plug the computer in, huh? And there we go. Okay, so plugged in. Well, just in the nick of time. The computer was about to go dead. Okay, all right. So now we can begin. And I guess I should start by, giving an update on my take on the quote-unquote war in Israel, because it's not really a war. If the war in 1967 was the 6-day war, then this is the 6-week or maybe the 6-month war. You get comfy. All right, I'm all comfy now, Deborah Danite. So, a war would have been we completely overran Gaza, maybe retook the Sinai while we're at it, took over southern Lebanon, and maybe that would have caused Jordan and Egypt to get involved, and then, conquer them as well while we're at it. And, we should all be barbecuing. Hold on a second. Close this door here. We should all be barbecuing on the Euphrates River by now, the way I see it. We're promised the land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River. Every place that the foot of or the sole of our foot treads is ours, the Torah tells us. And I think we should start taking over some land. But you know what? As I always say, this is the way it's going to happen is we can't just start conquering innocent people out of nowhere, right? That's not right. If people are friendly, they speak about, in the book of Judges, it speaks about how the Danites, I see Deborah is a Danite. So if you know about the story of Dan, how they looked for some new territory up north and finally found the city called Lachish where they settled, but it says that it was a city of peaceful inhabitants. It was a peaceful city, and nonetheless, they came with their priest, who they basically kidnapped or offered a job that they stole away from some guy named Micah's house, and now they had their priest with them, and they basically conquered a people who were giving them no trouble in this city of Lachish. That's in the book of Judges. So, okay, there you can make a case. Well, we're supposed to take over the land of Israel. Okay, we're supposed to take over from the 7 Canaanite nations. These Philistines, these Palestinians, you can make a case that they're the leftover dreg from some of the 7 nations, but they don't have an identity of the 7 nations. So even if you can't say that they're one of the 7 nations per se, and therefore Deuteronomy 20 doesn't explicitly, or the part of Deuteronomy 20 that speaks about wiping out anything that lives among the 7 nations doesn't explicitly apply to them. Nonetheless, we see that they are an enemy. They're the enemy of Israel, obviously. And therefore, there's no reason for us not to go to war with them and take over their territory. I guess the original point that I was trying to make is if people surrounding us are innocent, then maybe we don't have an excuse to conquer them and take over their territory, and that ultimately we are promised the land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River. And how is this going to come about? This is going to come about. Why is this thing kind of weird again? All right, every week I have technology issues. How is it going to come about? It's going to come about because I believe, this is the way I see it, Yahweh is going to incite those nations against us, and in an attempt for us to go out to war against them and take over their territory. So now we have a quote unquote peace with Egypt, so we can't take over their territory, right? We can't just walk in there and take over their territory. We have a quote unquote peace with Jordan, so we can't do that. But not to worry, because we are promised from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates River, eventually all of these quote unquote countries, they're just basically, it's falsely established borders that, Iraq, Jordan, all of these countries were just, established basically by the international community. They're not even real countries per se. But at any rate, eventually they'll start up with Israel. And this will give us the, shall I say, excuse. This will give us the reason for us to go to war out against them and conquer their territory. And eventually that promise will be fulfilled, where we own the land from the river of Egypt out to the Euphrates River. And instead of the way that people in Israel live today, which is a disgrace, people live in small apartments and apartment blocks crammed into cities. Some people live out on the land, but it's not too common. Instead of that, eventually the way we're all going to live is out on the land. We're going to have plenty of land. Israel will be a huge country, a big country, the size of, I don't know, whatever, Texas, something like that. And this will all happen at the hand of Yahweh. So how does this relate to the current situation? The current situation is that, again, we have to keep in mind that this is all in the hand of God. This is all in the hand of Yahweh. And this current situation is in Gaza is designed to teach us a lesson. I'm beginning to realize that. I kind of saw it, I guess, from the beginning, but I'm realizing it more and more every single day, that it's designed to teach us a lesson. And usually lessons mean, right, the harsh lessons in life, they always take the same form. You've been doing something wrong, and now you're going to pay the price for what you've been doing wrong. But it's not meant to destroy you. It's meant to make you stronger. It's meant to make you realize the errors of your way. And yes, certain parts of you die off, figuratively speaking, when that happens, or sometimes maybe physically speaking. Certain parts of you die off, but you as an individual keep on going. It's the same with the nation of Israel right now. There are certain parts that died off. 1,400 people were killed. God knows how many more were maimed, losing arms and legs and eyes and God knows what. It's horrible, 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 disgusting tragedy. And the anger, revenge that it creates in me, I can't even describe it. I wish for 1 week I were Prime Minister of Israel. That whole situation would be, Gaza would be, there would be no more Gaza. Let's put it that way. At any rate, which is the way we should be fighting the war. At any rate, the point I'm trying to make is that this is all a learning experience. And we are now, as Israel, as the people of Israel, we are now reaping some of the fruits that the seeds of which we've sown, sadly. So there's some more recency. It's all very complex. It's all links together. Nothing is individual. It's so easy to blame the left, right? And say, okay, for the past, 50 years or so, the left has been prominent. Actually, before that, but they've been prominent in Israel. They gave away Gaza in 2005. They gave away the Sinai Peninsula in 78, was it, or 77, and so on. But the left is actually, they exist to some degree as a reaction to rabbinical Judaism. Everything goes back to the same thing, which is that we as Israel are not keeping the Torah the way we're meant to. So as I always like to say, we have these two false philosophies that most Jews are following. Either they follow rabbinical Judaism or they follow secular Western culture. They either worship America or they worship the rabbis. And these two sides play off each other, and they're both a complete disaster. And you can't blame necessarily a leftist, because maybe the leftist just became a leftist because of a fair reaction to rabbinical Judaism. And so the whole thing is very complex. It's very difficult to place blame, but certainly we can place blame, at least, in recent decades, on these, as a former rabbi of mine used to say, these Hellenists that are in control of the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, who believed that you can buddy up to America, that America will be your God in place of Yahweh, that America will fight your battles for you. Everything that God is supposed to do, everything that Yahweh is supposed to do, Israel has placed its faith instead in its false God, the United States of America. And still worships, and these leftists, if you want to call them, these secular leftists, or I don't know if I call them secular, traditional leftists, even Bibi. I don't consider Bibi to be right-wing at all. I consider it to be, he calls himself right-wing or centrist, but he's very, very left-wing as far as I can, and on my scale. But all of these leftists, they've been causing Israel to worship this false God of the United States of America. And now we see that worshiping this false God of the United States of America has led to destruction and tragedy. And when it comes down to it, America is not there. Our false God is not there to stand up for us and protect us. In fact, as so many commentators have pointed out, America is really there to restrain and constrain Israel in its current, I can't even call it a war, its current operation, rather than help it. They come in the guise of helping, but their real goal is to restrain and constrain Israel from really fighting the war the way it needs to fight the war, which would be the way it fought the war, let's say, for 6 days in 1967, until the international community stopped Israel back then, before it was able to conquer Syria and Egypt, which was the direction that it was heading. So as usual, I think I've said a lot. I've rambled here a little bit, but that's okay. No big deal. The point of the matter is, the bottom line is that this is all designed, everything that's happening is designed to wake us up to it. Every death leads to a new rebirth. I think each of us in our own lives can say we've had many deaths and many rebirths. And those deaths have been painful, but they've always come with these realizations, things that we were blind to before, suddenly we became aware of, and that was a new rebirth. It happens to us. We're not the same individual that we were when we were 10 years old or 20 years old, or I don't know how old everyone is, 30 years old. And this is what's happening with Israel. This is the next stage, a new stage after October 7th. A new stage is opened, whereby the former Israel before October 7th, 2023 died, and there's a new stage that's opened up now. Where it's all going to lead, we shall see. Is this the final stage, or is this just an intermediate stage? Remains to be seen. But it is definitely a new stage in Israel and its understanding of its role. And ultimately, where it all is going to lead is that all of the nation of Israel will have to come back to the true Torah, not to the rabbinical bullshit that we're subjected to. I can't even stand listening to some of these rabbis. And I listened to a rabbi the other day say, 45 minutes of the most incredible nonsense you've ever heard in your entire life. Saying that the gematria of, what was it? The gematria of Hamas is the same as the gematria of, what was it again? Oh, of Gehenna. And saying that Hamas is mentioned in the Old Testament, because the word Hamas is mentioned in the Old Testament, which is true. The word Hamas is mentioned a number of times in the Old Testament. That is not a prophecy of Hamas. At any rate, just all of this rabbinical nonsense, all of this rabbinical distortion of the Torah, which then forces people to reject Judaism and turn to things like secular, left-wing, America Hellenistic kind of, approach. So the whole thing comes back to the same thing. We have to try our best to keep the true Torah. We have to try our best to shine this light out to the nation of Israel and to the world, our vision of the true Torah. And by the way, I never ever say that every one of my understandings and interpretations of the Torah is correct? Heck no. I bet you anything I'm going to find out that some of them, maybe even a lot of them, are wrong. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I know what's in my heart when I'm studying the Torah. I know what I'm trying to accomplish, which is to understand the true Torah and to practice the true Torah. And I know that everyone who identifies as a Karaite is trying to do the same thing. And that's our goal. That's our mission. See, the rabbis, they lie. They are liars because they say they have the answers when they don't have the answers at all. Okay, that's why they come up with such nonsense, but they sell it to the nation of Israel and to the world as if it's wisdom, as if it's ancient wisdom from Moses. But the fact of the matter is it's all lies. How do they come up with it? They come up with it through their quote oral law, which is not even really an oral law. It is a way of interpreting the Torah that they developed over, centuries, even millennia, and so they say that this oral law gives them the answers, but it's no better than they might as well almost be, opening animals, taking out the livers of those animals and reading those livers for the answers of how to interpret the Torah, because that's a lot of times almost what they do. They use these ridiculous Hellenistic methods to interpret the Torah. They say things that are Torah that have nothing to do with Torah. It's a long discussion. I was reading an article, which I've read before this week, discussing how Hellenistic rhetoric or Hellenistic rhetorical methods were used by the rabbis to develop their quote unquote oral law. So they lie. Okay, at least we as Karaites can be honest enough to say we don't have the answers, because that's part of the sin. That's part of our punishment, the punishment to the nation of Israel, that there was no more prophecy, that God packed up his bags, left his house, and went home and left us alone. And we're not supposed to have the answers. But if our hearts are straight with Yahweh, and if our hearts are straight to follow the Torah, then at least we're in the right direction. And if we get some of it wrong, it doesn't matter, because I think the intention is the important thing. And I think that the rabbis just give false hope or false belief that they have the answers when they don't. Some of their interpretations of the Torah are so bizarre, it can spin your head. And in the end, prophecy will be restored, and then we will see what's right, and then we'll know exactly how to follow the Torah. So the best we can do at this point is try to understand it to the maximum of our ability, and leave the rest in Yahweh's hands. Okay, so Devorah Danite says, I have a question. Is there a tabernacle currently in the land at all? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. If you mean the ancient tabernacle, in other words, the Ark of the Covenant, so there is a lot of Shabbat Shalom, Yehuda ben Avraham. There is a lot of YouTube videos out there. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, so right, where were we? I forgot. It doesn't matter. Anywho, so that is the story. We're going to go ahead and we're going to learn Torah, and we're going to try to understand Torah as best we can, and that's what we can do at this point in time. Okay, so here we go. Any questions? Oh, you asked if there's tabernacle. Has anyone built one again, or do we have anything left from it? The answer is no. I mean, there's replicas of the tabernacle. There's one, for instance, outside of Eilat, a little bit north of Eilat, in Timna Park, which I've been to, very worthwhile visiting. And it tries to make a replica for educational purposes of the tabernacle, and they do a great job, actually. But the incense altar is not made out of gold. It's made out of cardboard with painted gold. And the altar of sacrifice is not made out of bronze. It's made out of, I don't know, some kind of metal or something like that. So the bottom line is that no, there is no tabernacle. So the only place we are now allowed to bring sacrifices, once Jerusalem was chosen, and when was it chosen? It was chosen basically at the end of the book of I always forget, is it First Samuel or Second Samuel? The end of the book of First Samuel, it was chosen. No, at the end of the book of Second Samuel, doesn't matter. When David, the end of the book of Second Samuel, and so that the place of Jerusalem was chosen. That's the only place we're allowed to bring sacrifices to Yahweh. That was when he revealed what his permanent home is going to be. There are hints of it all along, but that's when he revealed what his permanent home is going to be. And so the only place that we could have bring sacrifices would be there. Okay. Now some people say that all you have to do is just build an altar and start bringing sacrifices. I am not sure I go for that, because the temple was more than just bringing meat sacrifices, which, by the way, I personally think are not going to be reinstated in the future. I think they're going to be disbanded. I've given my opinions about this in the past, but we'll have to wait and see. But at any rate, the temple service was a lot more than just meat sacrifices. Okay, it was offering incense, it was lighting the menorah, it was a whole bunch of different things. There was a tent of meeting. In fact, the sacrifices were outside the tent of meeting. So I don't agree that all you have to do is just build an altar and start bringing meat sacrifices, and we're back in business. I heard a rabbi say that Dina was a boy in the womb, but Yahweh changed his sex to a girl because of. Okay, yeah, exactly. I've heard all. I know. I always say that you can go to a rabbinical yeshiva and you can learn quote unquote Torah all day long and literally not learn a single word of Torah, not a single drop about Torah. Anywho, so the tabernacle doesn't exist. If you're asking another question, which a lot of people ask, which is the Ark of the Covenant, or where is the Ark of the Covenant? So there are all kinds of different theories. You know, there are as many YouTube videos out there as there are, big trees. So go look at your favorite YouTube video and you'll hear ideas anywhere from the Ark of the Covenant is still somewhere buried deep in the Temple Mount to it is in Ethiopia to, I don't know. There's a bunch of different theories out there. The bottom line is, again, we don't know. And where that second set of 10 commandments is, I guess, if they still exist, will be revealed at some point in the end of days. Okay, so can't speculate on that. Okay, all right. Where do I have an opinion? I don't. I really don't. I just don't know. I just listen to other people's opinions. Each one has their own reason why they think it's in a different place, and good for them. I don't think it matters really. We'll find out when we're meant to find out. Okay, let's start with this week's Torah study. So we are. We're in Parshat Vayetzei. This is Genesis 28. I might go back a little bit. Let's see, did we do 27? Did we read 27 last week? I think we started reading it and then didn't finish it. So let's read through 27 again, just to get context here. And so let me share the screen. Oops. Okay, so present, share screen, window, Torah, and there we go. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to read through very quickly Genesis 27. This is where Jacob deceives his father Isaac. We've spoken about that a zillion times before. I wonder what happens if let me just see something. If I close the camera for a second, is that going to make the situation better? Maybe it's about the same. Plus. Okay. Okay, so let's read through that. We're going to read through Genesis 27 very quickly, and then we'll start we'll get into Genesis 28. So this is Jacob deceiving, and this is part of last week's parsha. We're just backtracking a little bit. So we're in Genesis 20. Let's try that again. We are in Genesis 27:1. Wayehi ki zaken Yitzhak wati chahena enao mirot vayikra et Esau bino ha gadol vayomru elau bini vayomer elau hineni. So Isaac calls for Esav to give him the blessing. Remember, Isaac loves Esav, and Rebecca loves Jacob. So they each have their favored son. And to the end of his last days, Isaac seems to favor Esau. Verse 2, Wayomer hineni, hine na zakanti lo yad'ati yom moti. I'm old and I don't know, and I'm going to die any day now. We ata sana chelecha talecha ukashtecha se sadeh watsuda li side. So go out and get me something from the hunt. Remember, Esau is a hunter, whereas Jacob is an ishtam yoshev ohalim. Isaac is just a simple man who deals with sheep. He's a shepherd. Verse 4, We'aseli met amim kasher ahafti wa havia li we'ochela be'avur tivarechecha nafshi b'terem amuth. So make me a nice supper, which is going to inspire me to bless you before I die. Verse 5, Warivka shum'at be daber Yitzhak el Esau beno. Wa yelech Esau hasadeh lasud side lahavi. So Rivka overhears this, and Rivka has a different plan. So in both Rivka and Sarah, we see they have this kind of wisdom. They see something that their husbands can't see. And it's true that women have some kind of certain sixth sense that a smart man will always rely on when they're not us. Just a joke, ladies. But it happens in the case of Sarah. Sarah sees that Ishmael and Hagar have to go, and Rivka sees that her husband Yitzhak has to bless Yaakov and not Ishmael, and not the Esau. Okay. Verse 6, Rivka amra el Yaakov bina lemor hine sham'ati et avicha midaber el Esau achicha lemor. So I overheard dad speaking to your brother Esau. Verse 7, Hevia li tzayed wa'aseli mat amim wa'ochela wa'avarechecha lifnei Yahweh lifnei moti. Verse 8, Wa'ata b'ni shima b'koli l'asher ani misaveh misawat otach. So now Rivka comes up with an idea, and she says to she says to Jacob, listen to me, listen to what I tell you to do, okay? Verse 9, Lech na el hason wakach li misham shnei daye azim tovim wa'aseh otam met amim lavicha kasher ahev. So go grab a couple of kids we saw. And I think the word goat, the word in Hebrew is God. And the word goat probably comes from the English word goat, I think probably comes from the word God. And maybe the word kid also comes from the word God. I'd have to look that up. Kasher ani ahev. So go grab a couple of goats and I'll prepare them. And then you'll bring them to dad. Verse 10, Wa'eveta la'avicha wa'achal ba'avur asher yivarechecha b'fnei moto. Verse 11, Wayomer Yaakov el Rivka imo, hen Esau achi ish sa'ir wa'anochi ish halak. And so then it says, well, I'm Esau, my brother's very hairy, and I am smooth. I don't have a lot of hair on my body. And we saw that when Esau was born, he came out as an aderet se'ar, like a cloak of hair. And we know that his territory is called Har Seir, the mountainous country of Seir, which means the mountainous country of hairiness or hair. And we know two things about Esau. He's red and he's hairy. He's a hairy redhead. It's a hairy gingy. And he's called a dome because he's red, and also because of the red porridge that he bought that he sold the birthright for. And his territory is called Seir because he's hairy. So we have those two themes again, Esau again and again, that appear in the Torah. And so Esau is red and hairy. 12. Ulai Musheni Avi Wahaiti Be'anau Kimi Ta Tea Waheveti Alai Klala Willow Biracha. Verse 13. So he's worried Dad's gonna touch me and feel that I'm not hairy, like Esau is. Watomer lo imo alai klalat bini shima akoli walek kachli. So I'll take your curse for you. Rivka says, Wayalech wikach wayavele imo as imo mat amim kasher ahev aviu. So Rivka cooks, so he grabs two goats. Rivka cooks them up in the way that their father Isaac likes. Verse 15, Watikach Rivka et bigde Esau bina ha gadol ha hamudot asher ita babayet watalbesh et Yaakov bina katan. So he takes Esau's clothes and puts them on Yaakov. So now he's going to have like the smell of Esau. He's going to have the feel of Esau. And remember, Isaac is going blind, or is already pretty much blind, so he's not going to be able to see. So he can only go by his other senses. So we've got smell, we've got touch, and we're going to also find out that voice plays a role. And what are we leaving out? Taste. Well, I don't think he's going to lick Esau. Well, he's going to kiss him. That counts as taste. Anywho, well, smell and taste are kind of the same, so close enough. Okay. What then? Hamat amim wa et halechem asher asta yad Yaakov mina. So she gave the food she made for Isaac to Jacob to give to Isaac. Verse 18. Why yavo el avi? Why yomer avi? Yomer hineni mi atabeni. So again, here's our first hint, and we have many hints that Isaac feels something's up, something doesn't click here, right? Who are you, my son? Right? That you wouldn't ask that question if you knew exactly who it was. And you might say, okay, he's blind, so he's just, checking. But I think this is the first of many hints that we see in the story that that Isaac knew that something was up. Verse 19. Wayomer Yaakov el aviu, Anochi Esau, Bichorecha asiti kasher dibarta elai, Qum na shva wa'achla mitzedi, Ma'avur tivaracheni nafshecha. So he lies straight out. Yaakov lies straight out and says, I am Esau, sit up and bless me. He tells his father. Now, as I mentioned last time, there seems to be everyone, including a lot of Orthodox rabbis, always like to point out, Jacob is a deceptive son. He's a deceptive person. I don't think so at all. First of all, it was not even his idea. It was Rivka's idea. So how is he the deceptive one? That's number one. Number two, Esau is a deceptive person, and with deceptive people, you have to deal deceptively. You have to reflect back in this world the way people deal with you. That's not the Christian ethos. The Christian ethos says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, then turn the other cheek for them to slap you on the other cheek. That is not the Jewish ethos. The Jewish ethos is you reflect back to people the way they treat you. Yes, you can have some mercy mixed in there, right? You don't have to strike back at every barb at you, but in general, we don't ignore evil, run from it, ignore it, or think that by taking the high road that we're going to conquer that evil. ויאמר יצחק אל בנו, מה זה מיהרת למצוא בני, ויאמר כי יקרא יהוה אלוהיך לפני. So Yitzchak again, second indication that Yitzchak thinks something is up. How did you find that goat, or how'd you find my meal so quickly? Right? Esau was a hunter. He used to go out and hunt. It takes time. You don't just walk out. It's not like just like shooting deer in a zoo or something like that. You've got to go out and find them, capture them, bring them back home. So this is a second indication that Isaac knows or suspects that something is up. Verse 21, ויאמר יצחק אל יעקב, גישה נא ועמושך בני, אתה זה בני עשו או לא, אם לא. Third hint. So Isaac says to Yaakov, come close so that I can touch you, and that way I'll know whether you are my son Esau or not. So we have all these hints. I don't have to point out each one individually, but we have a whole bunch of hints. You can pay attention to them yourself as we go through the story, that Isaac knows that something is up. Verse 22, ויגש יעקב אל יצחק אביו, וימושהו, ויאמר קול יעקב, והידיים ידי עשו. Famous verse. The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Fourth hint. So Isaac clearly knows something's, not kosher. No pun intended. The goat was kosher. Verse 23. ולא הכירו, כי היו ידו ידי עשו אחיו שעירות ויברכהו. So he didn't recognize, or he had his suspicions, but in the end, he didn't, he went with it. Verse 24, ויאמר אתה זה בני עשו, ויאמר אני. And he says, are you my son Esau? So this is the second time he's asking it, right? Earlier he said, who are you? Now he's asking again, are you really Esau? So I think we're up to the fifth hint, but you get the idea. Clearly Isaac knows something is a little bit off. Where were we? Oops, okay. Right. Okay, verse 25. ויאמר הגישה לי ואוכלה מסד בני למען תברכך נפשי, ויגש ויגש לו ויאכל ויהווה לו יין וישת. So Isaac now eats the meal that Rivka has prepared for Jacob to bring to Isaac, and Jacob says, okay, I'll get dad a little bit drunk too, and maybe that'll soften him up a little bit more, or make him, prevent him from realizing even more that I'm not Esau. One second, please. Okay, verse 26. ויאמר אליו יצחק אביו, גישה נא ושקלי בני. So Isaac says to Jacob, come close so that I may kiss you. Verse 27. ויגש וישק לו, וירח את ריח בגדיו, ויברכהו, ויאמר ראה ריח בני כריח שדה אשר ברכו יהוה. Okay, so now he smells the scent of Esau's clothing, Remember that Jacob is wearing, why is this so damn slow? Jacob is wearing Esau's clothing, and so that's it. Now, Isaac goes ahead and blesses Esau. So, okay, so the blessing started in the last verse. Let's go on here. Verse 28, Vayitin lecha Elohim mital hashemayim umishemane haaretz urov dagan watirosh. Verse 29, Yabducha amim vayishtahu lecha leumim hawe gvir leachecha vayishtahu vayishtachavu lecha bnei imecha. So here, basically, here's the part of the blessing where Isaac gives prominence to Jacob. He believes he's blessing Esau, but he gives prominence to Jacob. He says that here ishtachavu lecha bnei amecha. Literally, the sons of your mother will bow down before you. Okay, so this is being given to Yaakov, who's the other sons of his mother. That's Esau. So the descendants of Esau, and when it says bnei, the sons, it doesn't mean the direct sons, it means the descendants. So basically, he's ultimately giving Yaakov prominence, the descendants of Yaakov, the prominence over the descendants of Esau. In other words, he's giving Israel prominence over the Edomites. Orecha arur umivarchecha baruch. Those who curse you, literally your cursors, shall be cursed, and your blessers shall be blessed. Verse 30. Waihi kasher kila Yitzhak yivarech et Yaakov waihi ach yaso yasa Yaakov me'et pnei Yitzhak aviu wa Esau achiu ba misedo. So just as Yaakov leaves, Esau, the real Esau, will the real Esau please stand up or please sit down to receive the blessing, comes in. Verse 31, Ya'as gam hu, mat amim wa yave la'aviu, wa yomer la'aviu, yakim avi, wa yochal mitzed beno ba'avur tivarcheni. So, tivarcheni nafshecha. So he says almost the same phrase, maybe exactly the same phrase. I'd have to go back and look, but I'm not going to do it now. He says basically the same phrase, sit up and bless me. Verse 32. Wayomer lo Yitzhak aviu, mi ata, wayomer ani bincha, bichorcha Esau. I am your son, your firstborn son, Esau. Wayiharad Yitzhak harada gedola ad me'od. So Yitzhak is trembles. Wayomer mi איפה הוא הצד ציד ויבא לי ואוכל מכל בטרם תבוא ואברכהו גם ברוך יהיה. So who's this other person that came before you and whom I blessed? Verse 34. ישמע עשו את דברי אביו ויזעק צעקה גדולה ומרה עד מאוד ויאמר לאביו Baracheni gam ani avi. So Isaac is trembling. Esau is screaming at the top of his lungs, shrieking over the whole situation, and then basically he begs his father to also bless him. Verse 35. Wayomer ba achicha b'mirma wa'ikach bir chatecha. Your brother came in deceit and took your blessing. Verse 36. Wayomer achi kara shemo Yaakov uyakveni ze p'amayim ze bechorati lakach wahine ata lakach birchati vayomer halo atzalta li biracha. So now Esau says, you've named him, I'm paraphrasing again, you've named him Jacob correctly, or that is a good name for him, because he has overtaken me. And that doesn't make any sense in the English. What does Jacob have to do with overtaking? But the word akav, well, the underlying root ekev means a heel, but la'akov means to overtake, or let's say grab by the heel, pull back, and then go past. So la'akov, even in modern Hebrew, there's a similar word la'akov. So if you're on the highway and someone passes you, which happens all the time in Israel, because these Israelis really don't know how to drive. I don't know how they even got licenses, most of them. But then you would say they pass you, okay? They overtake you. So it's the same. It's probably the same root. Just but and fa are basically similar. So, but Yaakov, okay, means to overtake or surpass. And remember, the reason that Yaakov was named as such is from the root word ekev, which means a heel. And when Yaakov came out of Rivka's womb, he was grabbing onto the heel of his brother Esau, his older brother Esau. He was the second one, and he was grabbing onto his brother Esau's heel. And now he's figuratively grabbed on to Esau's heel, pulled him back, and overtaken him. And Esau points out that Yaakov has done this twice. Once when he purchased the birthright from me, which was the whole stew of red lentils that he sold to Esau in return for the birthright. And now because he's stolen the blessing. But the fact of the matter is, the first one with the selling of the birthright for the pot of lentils, that was fair and square. Esau could have said no, but he decided that pot of lentils, immediate gratification, he was hungry, was more important than long-term rewards, or long-term satisfaction. Okay, verse 37. Why Ya'an Yishak, why Yomer Le'Esau, Hin Gevir Samtiu Lach Wa'et Kol Echau Natati Lo La'avadim Wa Daran Wa Tirosh Simachtiv Ulecha Efo Ma Aseh Beni. So Isaac says, what's going on here? Okay. Isaac says, okay. I see it's unplugged. Wait, hold on one second. I'm going to move this to the other side here. That's a problem. Okay. So Isaac says, I've made him a gvir, basically a master, I would translate this as. The strong one. Yeah, they translate it as master. I've made him a master over you and over all his brothers. So what other brothers does he have? None. But it's just talking about the descendants. Ach can mean kin. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay. I've made all of his brothers so I've made all of him and his descendants servants or slaves to you. I'm sorry, you will be their servants and slaves. Dagan v'tirosh samachtiv, and I've given him, Dagan is a fancy word for grain, tirosh is a fancy word for wine. Samachtiv, I have placed upon him, I would translate this as, let's see how they do it here, sustained him. And now what can I do for you, my son? So Yitzchak and Esau are very upset. They understand they've been duped. They understand they've been played, and all that Yaakov has left for Esau is a bunch of crumbs. Verse 38. Vayomer Esau el aviu, haberacha achad hi lecha avi. But it's sometimes hard to see the vowelization here because it's just the way the print is. Baracheni gam ani avi. Wayisa Isa kolo wayev. And so Esau started crying. He raised his voice and started crying. So he's a little crybaby at the end of the day. Right? Isn't this such a lesson? I mean, all of these tough guys. So he's a tough guy, Esau, right? He's a hunter. He goes out and he he hunts animals and brings them back, and he's a man of the field. It said ish sadeh yodet tzayid. He's a man of the field, a skilled hunter. And Yaakov is an ish tam yoshev ohalim. Yaakov is a simple person who dwelled in tents. So we have this difference between their personalities, which we'll see, even more so or reinforced further on. But the bottom line is that all of these types are they're crybabies. They don't really have any internal fortitude. So he got deceived. So he's not such a tough guy after all. At the end of the day, now he starts crying like a little baby. Again, if this were the parsha, I'd go into it a little bit more, but I want to move through verse 39, and that should be a lesson. I mean, if you look again at the Arabs in Gaza, at the end of the day, they are cowards, man. Anyone who's ever interacted with them will tell you the same thing. They're cowards. They play it tough, but they're cowards. They will whine and cry like little babies when the gun is figuratively and literally their heads. Okay, verse 39. Ya'an Yitzhak aviu, Wayomer Elau. Hine, Mishmane ha'aretz yi'eh, Moshevecha u'mita l'shamayim ma'al. So he's giving him, I guess you could say, physical blessings. That will be blessed with wealth, with good sustenance. Wa'al charbecha yihyeh wa'et achicha ta'avod. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. So he can't undo the fact that he's already given Yaakov prominence. Hold on 1 second, please. Just get one thing. So yeah, you will live by the sword. He's a hunter, so he's going to live by the sword. This is his personality anyway. This is what he is. And you will serve your brother, or perhaps, but you will serve your brother. Wahaya kasher tarid. Uperakt ulo mi'al tzavrecha. And it shall be if he, that's a tough one to translate. Let's see how they translate it here. Becomes restless. If we're a parsha, I'd go look for some different translations. But we'll go with that. It becomes restless, then you will break his yoke off of your neck. So basically, if Yaakov doesn't act correctly, if Yaakov doesn't follow the covenant, if the Israelites don't follow the covenant, then Esau will no longer be under the yoke of Yaakov. In other words, they can cause trouble for Israel and for the descendants of Yaakov. Okay. Second. Okay. Why istom Esau et Yaakov ara bracha asher beracho avi wayomer Esau belibo יקרבו ימי אבל אבי ואהרגה את יעקב אחי. So Yaakov, Esau then hated Yaakov because of what happened. But he says, well, my father's going to die soon, and once my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother Yaakov. Fratricide. Why? יוגד לרבקה את דברי עשו בנה הגדול, ותשלח ותקרא ליעקב בנה הקטן, ותאמר אליו, הנה עשו אחיך מתנחם לך להרגך. So Rivka tells Yaakov that Esav intends to kill him. Verse 43, Wa'ata b'ni shema v'koli wakum birach lecha el Lavan ahi harona. So get out of here and go to my brother Lavan in Haran. Remember, Haran is ultimately where Terach, the father of Abraham, moved the family from Ur Kasdim to Haran. Haran is in Padan Aram, in the territory of Padan Aram, within the empire of Aram Naharaim, the Aramean Empire, kind of in southern Turkey. Verse 44. So go back there. The same place. Remember, we met Lavan before. Verse 44. What? Ishafta imo yamim ahadim ad asher tashuv hamat achicha. And stay with him a little while until get out of town for a little while until your brother calms down. Verse 45. Of course, that little while is going to end up being 20 years, and he's going to come back with 2 wives, 2 concubines, and 12 children. Verse 45. Ad shuv af achicha mimcha v'shachach et asher asita lo wa shalachti v'kachticha misham lama eshkol gam shnechem yom echad. So, in other words, and I'm going to paraphrase here, until your brother calms down a bit, until he, changes his mind, he relents, he calms down, and then shalachti v'lakachticha misham, I'll send for you and I'll take you back from there. Lama eshkol gam shnechem yom echad. Why should I mourn for the both of you in a single day? Again, if it were a parsha, I'd pick that one apart, but I'm not going to. Verse 46, Vatomer Rivka el Yitzchak, chatzti b'chayai, mipnei banot hait, im lokech Yaakov isha mivnot hait, ka'ele mivnot haaretz, lama li chaim. So Rivka is at the end of a rope regarding the daughters of Chet that Esav had married. Remember, Esav married 2 Hittite women, Bosmat and whatever. I can't remember the name of the other one. Let's look it up. What were the names of Esav's wives? Genesis 26:35. Ayudit and Bosmat, 26:34 to 35. So, okay. So these wives that Esav took from the local people who are ultimately going to be wiped out or are slated to be wiped out by the Israelites. These wives are driving Rivka crazy. She can't take it. She's at the end of the rope. She cannot take it anymore. So that lays the groundwork for Yaakov taking a wife from his mother's line, or from both parents' line, right? Because they're all related. I think we said Rivka was the first cousin once removed of Yaakov. I'm sorry, of Isaac. Okay, so these people, remember, these Canaanites, the Hittites are one of the nations, the Canaanite nations. They're already not doing too well. They're already, not good people. And this only continues until eventually they are going to be wiped out by Joshua, or at least the process will be begun whereby they should be wiped out. Okay, that brings us to Genesis chapter 28. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? Before we go into chapter 28. Okay, then let's go on to 28. So Jacob flees. ויקרא יצחק אל יעקב ויברך אותו ויסווהו ויאמר לו תיקח אישה מבנות כנען. So he blesses him and commands him not to take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. That's follow up to what we saw in the previous verse. Now, if we go back, so there's no, how are they doing it here? I guess they are putting the Samachs in the Pez. 1 second. Well, it's hard to tell from this text, but okay. So, no, there is a Samach here. So they are, okay? So there's no paragraph or chapter ending here. So Genesis 27 really flows right into Genesis 28. The numbering system is a much later invention of the Middle Ages. Some priest, I always forget his name, or some monk came up with it, Stephen something or other. Okay, verse 28. So this is a continuation of the previous verses where Rivka says she's at the end of the rope because of the Hittite wives, the local wives that Esav has taken. So Esav is problematic, right? And so Jacob, we clearly have a picture painted here of Jacob being the good one and Esav being the bad one. He's violent. He's impulsive. He's a crybaby when he doesn't get his way. He marries these local women who are of nations that are eventually slated to be wiped out by the Israelites. So he is a problem child, this Esau, and that's why it says that I loved Jacob and I hated Esau. That's in the book of Malachi. Let's even look at that for a second. Malachi, I think they usually call it in English. Let's look at that for 1 second. Last book of the Tanakh. So this is Malachi, chapter 1. We'll just go from verse 1 to 5. Masad Dvar Yahweh el Israel biad malachi. The burden of the word of Yahweh to Israel in the hand of Malachi. Malachi was, temporally speaking, in other words, in terms of time, he was the last of the prophets. And the book is the last book in the Jewish Old Testament. Verse 2, Ahavti etchem, Amar Yahweh. I love you, or I have loved you, says Yahweh, speaking to Israel. Amartem, b'ma avtanu. But you've said, why do you love us, or for what do you love us? Halo ach Esau Yaakov ne'um Yahweh. Was not Esau Yaakov's brother? Declares Yahweh, Wahev et Yaakov. And I loved Yaakov, what Esau saneti, but I hated Esau. It should be pointed out that love and hate, when this love is contrasted to hate, it doesn't really mean the same thing. It really means more like I favored Yaakov, but I disfavored Esau. Yaakov was my chosen one. Esau was my rejected one. Wasim et harao shmama with nahalato tanot midbar. And I have made, maybe I will make, his mountain country a desolation, and his inheritance a place for the jackals of the desert. So I'm gonna make Esau's territory. What is Esau's territory? Har Seir, the mountain country of Seir. Seir means hairy, the hairy mountains. We can call them, if we were to translate into English. Where does Esau live? He lives on Mount Hairy, or in the hairy mountains. Yuck. The image is pretty disgusting. Okay, verse 4. Chit tomar Edom, Gushashnu, Wanashuv, Wanivne, Haravot, Ko amar Yahweh Tzevaot. And if you shall say, we've destroyed, or Edom has been destroyed or made poor. Wanashuv, Wanivne, Haravot, but nonetheless we will come back and rebuild the ruins. If that's what Edom should say, yes, it's true. So I guess this is talking about what was already done, not what will be done. Well, not necessarily. Okay, if Edom should say we've been brought to poverty, but we're gonna come back and we're gonna rebuild our ruins. If that's what Esau would say, Esau's descendants, Ko amar Yahweh Tzevaot. So says Yahweh of hosts. Hema yivnu ani haros. They may build them up. They may build up their ruins, but I will destroy them again. Again, paraphrasing a little bit. V'karu lahem vul ish'ah. And I will call them the border of evil. Ha'am asher za'am Yahweh ad olam. And the people against which Yahweh has anger or rages against until the end of time. Verse 5, and your eyes, now speaking to Israel, remember this is a message to Israel, your eyes will see it. And you will say, Yahweh is great even outside the borders of Israel. In other words, Yahweh is not just the God in the land of Israel, he's the God of the entire earth. So his prophecies or his determinations, what will happen in nations, come true not just for Israel, but for all of the nations. And Edom, who he is hated or disfavored, who he has internal anger against, internal rage against, he will destroy them. He's already destroyed them. And they think they're going to come back and rebuild. They can rebuild, and he'll destroy them again. And this will be proof that Yahweh is God, not only within the land of Israel, but outside of the land of Israel as well. That's what Malachi is saying. Okay. All righty. So getting back to Genesis chapter 28, where we are. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to flip on the light here. Just open it. A little bit more. No, I'm going to flip on the light. Okay, so we have a consistent picture of this Esau dude. He's not a good character. He's not painted as a good character. And of Jacob, who's an innocent person. He's a lamb. What's the expression? A lamb among the wolves, or he's a I don't know, a mongoose among the snakes or something like that. No, the mongoose is the one that could. You get the idea. He's a good guy in a very bad world, and so he has to survive. And so this idea that he's somehow a bad person because he's deceptive, I completely reject that. I've said this many times over the years. Yaakov is the good guy, and he's dealing with a very bad guy, and you cannot deal with a bad guy as if he's a good guy. You can only deal with bad people in a bad way. All right, imagine, and this is, let's relate it back to current events. This is exactly the mistake that Israel made with Hamas. They thought, and I heard this in interviews on the news from various Israelis that they made the mistake of thinking that these Gazans are like them. Okay, we have a good heart, so we think that all we have to do is be nice to them and they'll respond in kind. And this was one of, we spoke at the beginning of this talk about wake-up calls. This was one of the wake-up calls. I mean, I knew this all along, okay? I'll tell you a story in a second about when I first came to Jerusalem in 1993. And I didn't know my ass from my elbow at that point in terms of what was going on. I'd never been in Israel before. I was just getting back into Judaism, you know, after having grown up in the suburbs of New York City as a conservative, the son of conservative Jewish parents, you know, being forced to go to Hebrew school a couple of times a week and not thinking much of it, into it, you know, having a Jewish identity, but not really too much into my Jewish identity. And then, long story, but eventually I found my way back to a much stronger Jewish identity, and I decided, let me hop a plane and go to Israel. And I get to Israel, I landed in Israel, first time ever I'd been in Israel. In fact, aside from Mexico and Canada, the first time I'd ever been out of the United States of America. Mexico and Canada don't count because they're part of the United States of America, even if it's not official. And I landed in Tel Aviv on June 23rd, 1993, with a very simplistic, naive view of the world. I was in my early 20s. And I remember, there's so much to tell, but I remember that, so I was placed in the old city. I went to learn at a yeshiva called Torah. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. And I was placed in a dorm in the old city, which is why I chose that yeshiva. I wanted to be in the old city of Jerusalem, on a street called Miskav Ladach Street, which, I mean, the old city is small as it is, but Miskav Ladach Street is right near the border between the Jewish section of Jerusalem, of the old city of Jerusalem, and the Arab section, or the Muslim section. There are 4 sections. There's the Jewish section, the Muslim section, the Christian section, and the Armenian section. The Armenians migrated to Jerusalem mostly in the early 1920s after they were, I guess there you can actually call it an attempted genocide by the Turks, by the Young Turks in the early 1920s. They attempted to basically wipe out all the Armenians in Turkey, and some of them fled to Jerusalem, established communities in Jerusalem, and so there's still an Armenian quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. Anywho, I digress. So my point being that, so I was right near the border between the Jewish section and the Arab section. And I remember, you know, and I was very naive. I grew up very liberal. I come from a very, you know, liberal Jewish New York family, typical, but I had already begun to become somewhat conservative, mainly because I taught, before I left for Israel, I spent about 2 years teaching school back in New York City, and you know, being around a whole bunch of screaming, ranting kids all day long will turn you from a liberal to a conservative very, very quickly. At any rate, but I was still kind of liberal, and I remember seeing these little Arab kids, quote unquote Palestinians, playing ball or something like that, playing soccer, I think it was. And they said, "Oh, how cute! That's so nice." And I said, "Oh, let me join in. I'll kick the soccer ball to them, and we all love each other, and blah 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 blah. You know, we're all one big happy, you know, children of Abraham family." And I remember realizing something about them, that they were different from the Jewish children. There was something that was very violent about them. I don't know how I picked it up. I don't remember the specific incident, but I remember from this incident that I walked away from it saying that these people are just a little bit different from the Jewish kids. The Jewish kids have a certain gentleness to them. Yes, they're a bit obnoxious, but they have a certain gentleness to them. And these kids have a certain wildness to them, a certain animalistic wildness to them. And so I realized at that point, that was my first realization. That was my realization. I didn't have to pay a very heavy price for it. That there was something fundamentally different from the way that the Arabs, the so-called Palestinians, viewed the world, or their essence, and the essence of the Jews. And that only, continued to solidify and grow over the years. I eventually became very right-wing, associated with the Kahana movements, all this kind of stuff. And to this day, there was never a single day where I ever thought for a second that Israel could make any kind of peace with the Arabs, that the only solution to the Arab problem is to expel them or kill them all from whatever territory is causing us problems. Anywho, this is the difference that we see here in Malachi. I love Jacob, and I hate Esau. Okay, there's a fundamental difference between Jacob and Esau. There's a fundamental difference between Israel and, if you want to call them the Palestinians, whatever you want to call them, these people that surround Israel. And this is the mistake that we can make. We can treat them as if, they're, I should put this back on. Let's do it like that. So you can see some of that. Okay, we could treat them as if okay, they're good people. Just like we have a good heart, they have a good heart. And this is the mistake that Israelis have been making for decades, longer than decades. And this now came back to bite Israel on October the 7th, as has been pointed out in the various news stories. Many of the people who were killed or injured, or who had family members who were killed or injured or kidnapped, these were peace activists. There were entire communities of basically people who had founded those communities based on this idea of peace and coexistence between the Jews and the Arabs. And it was a horrible, horrible wake-up call for them, what happened October 7th. But some of them, I remember one in particular, said something like, we thought that if we were kind to them, if we gave them resources, then we can turn them into, people like us. And I realized on October 7th, I'm paraphrasing, I realized on October 7th that there is something fundamentally different between us, meaning the Jews, and them. And that's true. It's the same that we see here in Malachi between Esau and Jacob, and it's the same that we've seen throughout our entire reading of the Tanakh here with the story of Jacob and Esau. There's just something fundamentally different that can never ever be changed between Jacob and Esau. Jacob has a kind heart. Jacob is a simple, straightforward, honest person, and Esau is a wild man of the field, a hunter, a violent person, an impulsive person, a murderous person, ready to murder his own brother because of a perceived wrong. So there's something fundamentally different going on between Esau and Jacob. Now, that doesn't mean that every individual Gazan, let's say, is bad. There may be some individuals that are good individuals, and I know, I've watched, a lot of news interviews over the past weeks since October 7th, and there are a couple that stand out. This is one guy who has he's been interviewed. I don't think he speaks English, so he speaks only in Hebrew. He's been interviewed a lot, who I think he grew up in Ramla, I think it was, and then he was sent to Gaza at a certain point, and he was taken in at a certain point by a Jewish family, and he converted to Judaism. And he's like, I wish most Jews were as ardent Zionists as he is, but obviously he knows what the people down in Gaza are like. And man, if he were defense minister, Gaza would be wiped off the face of the earth probably. But he understands that there's something fundamentally different between the Jews and the surrounding peoples, that we are not the same as them. There might be individuals among them that are good people and that have a good heart. But overall, since nations are not just random agglomerations of people, but they're a kind of shared consciousness, then the shared consciousness of the neighbors around us is not the same as our shared consciousness. And it's important to keep that in mind. And I think that's exactly what's pointed out in this Esau story over here throughout. Okay, the difference, the fundamental difference between Esau and Yaakov. Okay. Right. Let me go back to this. There we go. Okay, so Esau, now we're in Genesis chapter 28, verse 6. וירא עשו כי ברך יצחק את יעקב, ושלח אותו פדנה ארם לקחת לו משם אישה, בברכו אותו ויסעו אליו לאמור לא תיקח אישה מבנות כנען. One second. So Yitzchak sees that his wife, that their mother, Esau and Jacob's mother, has had enough of these Hittite women that Esau has married. And so Yitzchak, just as he's now sent Yaakov to Padan Aram to take a wife, so now he commands his son Esau not to take any more of the local women. Verse 7 and 8. וישמע יעקב אל אביו ואל אמו וילך פדנה ארם. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. 1 second. Let me reread this. עשו כי ברך יצחק את יעקב ושלח אותו פדנה ארם לקחת לו משם אישה וברכו אותו ויצב עליו לאמור לא תקרא. No, I'm sorry. Esau saw that, I said it wrong. I explained it wrong. Esau saw that Yitzchak had commanded Yaakov to go back to the family back in Aram, back in the Aramean lands, to take a wife. So Esau saw that his father had commanded Yitzchak had commanded his brother Esau not to take Canaanite women as wives. Verse 7, וישמע יעקב אל אביו ואל אמו וילך פדן ארם. And that Yaakov had listened to his father and mother and went to Padan Aram. Verse 8, וירא עשו כי רעות בנות כנען בעיני יצחק אביו. And Esau saw that these Canaanite women that he had taken as wives were causing trouble or were evil, literally were doing bad things, were causing problems, causing animosity or causing, bad feelings for Yitzchak, his father, because the mother, Rivka, also was at the end of a rope, we saw. Or maybe that's why Yitzchak felt this way. Verse 9, וילך עשו אל ישמעאל ויקח את מחלת בת ישמעאל בן אברהם אחות נביאות על נשאו לו לאישה. So he decides, I'm not going to get rid of these two Canaanite women, these two Hittite women, but I'll take another one. I'll take an Ishmaelite woman. And so he takes one of the daughters of Ishmael. So what's the relationship between Ishmael and Esau? Well, it's Uncle Yishi. Yitzchak's half-brother is Ishmael, and Ishmael's daughter is the one that Esau marries. So he marries his own first cousin. He marries Uncle Ishi's daughter. Okay, now this is where we begin this week's Parsha. And this is all really important stuff. So that's it. Jacob's out of there. Jacob is on his way back to Aram Naharaim, Padan Aram, Haran. 3 different names that we see for that territory, specifically the country, territory, and city, respectively. Vayetzei Yaakov mi Be'er Sheva vayelech Harana. So Yaakov left Be'er Sheva and went towards Haran. So let's add that to our list of patriarchal journeys. Let's make sure it's set up correctly. It is. All right. So where we left This was Yitzchak. So Yitzchak, we last found out, he dug some wells. Remember, he was kicked out of Gerar, and then he settled in Beersheba. That's in Genesis chapter 26, verse 7. Make this a little bit easier to see. Okay, so that's Yitzchak. So the family is now located, as of that incident with the wells, in Beersheba. And it says that Yaakov left Beersheba and went towards Haran. Okay, so now we see Yaakov leaves Beersheba towards Haran. I'll add this. Second. Few threes, 2 rows. Okay, that should do it. So now we're up to Yaakov. So this is Genesis 28:10. And I guess we could put it like this. I guess I could put the whole phrase now. I don't even know. This is not really a stop along the way. I'll just put Harana. Oops, where'd we go? Put it like this. Maybe I should put the whole phrase. Hold on a second. I'll do it like this. Okay. Oops. Let's do that again. I mentioned I really hate technology. From. Okay. I'll just do it like this. Beersheba, or leaves Beersheba. English. Okay. From. Beersheba towards Han. Okay. There's no digging altar there. Okay. Fine. We'll just leave it like that. Any comments here? We could say after. Jeez. After Esau threatens or intends kill Yaakov and Isaac wants him to find a wife. Non-Canaanite wife, I'll say. Okay, good enough. Say Yaakov leaves Beersheba after Esau intends to kill him, and Yaakov wants him to find non-Canaanite wife. Okay, good enough. So there we go. That's that. Okay, so Fine. So Yaakov leaves Beersheba. That's where the family was at this point. Verse 11. Why yifga ma'makom? Why yalen sham? Kibah shemesh. Why yikach me'avnei hamakom? Why sim me'rashtao? Why yishkav b'makom ahu? So he came across a place. So we find out that this place is Bet El. Bet El also becomes a very important cultic site. I don't think we've mentioned Bet El before, have we? We did. So Abraham in Genesis 12:8 built an altar there. That was the first mention of Bet El. Why is this thing acting like this? Jesus. So Abraham built an altar there. Bethel is to the west of Ai and to the east of where he pitches his tent. Okay, good enough. What's going on here? It's so slow. Okay. So we did have a mention of Bethel. We had another mention of Bethel in Genesis 13:3. So then Abraham goes down to Egypt, comes back up to the Negev, and then ultimately ends up back in Bethel. Right? So Bethel is mentioned before, twice in the life of Abraham. And Abraham had built an altar there. Participate in Streamyard if you have the Streamyard event identifier. Otherwise, you just get Streamyard. I don't get it, Phil. I don't know what you're saying. I'm not sure what you're saying. All right, let's go on. Maybe I'll take a break in 5 minutes or so. So, okay, so you've got a makom where yelen sham kibah shemesh. So he came across a certain place because the sun had set, or the sun was setting. So he took the stones from that place and put them around his head. I don't know if he was using them as a pillow or maybe as a little, like a makeshift kind of like fence around him. And he went to sleep in that place, or lay down to go to sleep in that place. So here is Jacob's famous dream, Jacob's ladder. Seven. I don't know what I don't know what you're telling me, Phil. 1 second. I think you have the wrong one. I'm going to give you the link again. If you want to come onto StreamYard, then you should follow this link. Okay. If you follow that link, and you're missing a 2, by the way, in yours, that's why it's not working. Yours starts with a 7. Okay. If you follow that link, you should be able to come onto StreamYard. I don't know. You and StreamYard don't get along. I don't. I think StreamYard. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay. V'yachlom v'hine sulam mutzav arza. So he dreamt a dream, and behold, there was a ladder with its base on the ground, with rosho magia shemaima, and its top reaching up to the heavens. Wahine malachei Elohim olim wa yordim bo, and the angels of God were going up and down this ladder. So here we have the famous Jacob's ladder dream. Let's check to see, Phil. So they were ascending and descending. Why the opposite? I don't think there's any deep meaning to that. So the rabbis give some nonsense about the angels of the land of Israel were going up, and the angels of outside the land of Israel were coming down, or some kind of nonsense like that. But I just think that in the Torah, usually there's a certain order to things. So so usually up comes before down. You just see that. That's just generally the way things are said, just like in English, right? I went up and down the street looking for, I don't know, a falafel joint. You don't say I went down and up the street. You said I went up and down the street. Why? That's just the way the language works. I don't know if I don't see any, deep meaning for the up coming before the down. Or yeah. Verse 13. Wahine Yahweh nitzav alao, and behold, Yahweh was positioned upon it, in other words, was standing at the top of it. Yomer ani Yahweh, Elohei Avraham avicha, wa Elohei Yitzhak. Ha'aretz asher ata shochev aleha lecha etnena ulezarecha. So the land that you're lying upon, I will give it to you and to your offspring, literally your seed. Okay. All right, whitey boy. So, but it says device is not connected, but I hope you found your way. Yes, the first time I've seen that link. Okay, well, that's a link I posted everywhere, so I don't know why I haven't seen it, Phil, but all right. So this is the first time that God appears to Jacob. Okay, and this makes sense. Jacob is now, he's breaking out on his own. It's like when you go off to college and you're living on your own for the first time. This is the first time that Jacob is living on his own. He's starting his life as a man. And just as he starts his life, he leaves his father Yitzhak back in Beersheba. He starts going off to Haran. He's running away from Esau. He's looking for a wife. He's just starting off his life. And immediately Yahweh appears to him and says, I will give you this land. This is the Jacob's ladder dream. I should put down Bethel, right? Well, we didn't mention Bethel yet. So that's a good way to start off your life. I remember starting off my life going to college. It was a disaster. I went to doesn't matter what college, some fancy schmancy college back in the United States, ready to start off my life as a man. And within a year, I realized I couldn't stand the place. I absolutely hated it. And whatever. Sipurim, as they say in Hebrew. Lots of stories. Verse 14. And your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. And they will burst out, or you will burst out towards the west, towards the east, towards the north, and towards the south. And in you and in your seed shall be blessed all of the families of the earth. Okay, so this is a very similar blessing that was given to Abraham in Genesis 15. Okay, let's look at that for a second. So if we go to Genesis 15. So that's the stars in the sky. Now I have to remember where it was, the dust of the earth. I don't know. I'd have to remember. Okay. 1 second. Here. I can't find it right now. I should make a list of that as well, of all the blessings that are given. Maybe we'll start that next year. Okay. At any rate, so this blessing was given before, that your seed shall be like the dust of the earth. I guess it was given to Abraham. I'd have to remember now. Maybe it was Isaac. Paratz the Yama. In other words, the point is that Jacob is now getting this blessing that was given to his forefathers by God to Abraham and to Isaac. So it's clear that the blessing, this ultimate blessing that was given to Abraham, is now being passed through Isaac and now down to Jacob. The baton is being passed on to Jacob. And yes, the other ones, Ishmael, Esau, they get blessings, but they don't get the blessing. They are not the true continuation of Abraham. True blessing, the true continuation of Abraham, goes through Isaac, and it goes through Jacob. And so it's a mistake to think that this blessing applies to all the descendants of Abraham. Yes, Ishmael is blessed, Esau is blessed. They don't have the blessing. The blessing, when it speaks about the blessings that are given to Abraham and the descendants of Abraham, that is realized through Isaac and through Jacob, not through the other branches. Because Abraham had other sons. He had Ishmael, and he also had the sons of Keturah. Isaac had Esau as well as Jacob. So each of these branches are kind of, cut off, shall we say. Not cut off, but they're not given them in terms of the blessing. They're cut off, and only one branch is the branch through which this true blessing originally given to Abraham flows. And that's through the blessing of Jacob, who ultimately becomes the nation of Israel, obviously. Okay. Wait a second, Phil, are you Whitey Boy? I'm confused. No, because you came into, I don't know. Whatever. Okay, okay, verse 15. Wahine anochi imach shimarticha bechol asher telech washiv oticha el haadama hazot ki lo azvecha ad asher im asiti et asher dibarti lach. Behold, I am with you, and I will guard you. I keep watch over you everywhere you go, and I will return you to this land. And I will not, because I will not leave you until I've done that which I've spoken to you. Okay? Because he knows that now Jacob is heading out of the land of Israel. But nonetheless, he's being promised in this place in Bethel that this land will be his, even though it doesn't seem so. Abraham had to leave the land of Israel as well. Abraham was born outside the land of Israel, and he had to leave. He went down to Egypt during the famine with Sarai, with his wife Sarai. And now Jacob has to leave. Isaac was told, don't leave the land. And so he ended up going down to Gerar. Verse 16, Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato, Vayomer achen ish Yahweh, b'makom hazeh, v'anochi lo yedati. So Yaakov woke up from his sleep, and he said, behold, Yahweh is in this place, and I didn't even know it. Verse 17, Vayir'ah, and he feared. Vayomer ma norah hamakom hazeh, and he said, how terrible, how awe-inspiring. I don't know, it's horrible. There's no way to really translate terrible. How, that's the way they usually translate it. How terrible is this place? Ein zeh im beit Elohim. This is none other than the house of God. Zeh v'zeh she'ara shamayim. And this is the gate to heaven. So for me, this is foreshadowing that this is the place where the Temple Mount will be built. However, it doesn't make sense because we know the Temple Mount is in Jerusalem, and we know that Bethel is not the same as Jerusalem, because we know that Yerovam, the son of Navat, built two golden calves, one in Dan and one in Bethel, as opposed to the Temple Mount that was in Jerusalem. However, I don't know. It's close. Bethel is close to Jerusalem. And maybe that general area is called Bethel. I still think maybe that there's some evidence, especially based on verses like this or statements like this, that this place that Jacob laid his head down was in Jerusalem, was on what later became the Temple Mount. I don't know. I'd have to think about it a lot more. I thought it was for a while, and then I remembered, that Bethel is explicitly contrasted with Jerusalem. And I think they've excavated Bethel, and it's not where Jerusalem is. But maybe it's just referring to a general area. It would be an interesting study to look into. Anywho, a phrase like this is the house of God, and this is the gate to heaven. I mean, doesn't that sound like it's describing the Temple Mount? So I'm going to leave that one as a question mark. Okay, let's get a little commentary on these verses from 10 through 17. We'll do a little bit of Robert Alter. So we are in Genesis 28. Is this thing behaving itself today? No, of course not. Oops. I wonder what happens if I turn. Let me just try something. I just want to try one thing. Stop the count for a second and see if this makes a difference. I'm going to try to scroll up and down here. I don't think so. Still sluggish. All right, we'll just have to deal with it as usual. It's time for me to get a new computer. Okay, Genesis 28, 35. Oh my God, why is this thing so slow? Come on now. Behave. Okay. Okay. Come on now. Stupid thing. Maybe I close a couple of tabs here. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that for now. Okay, so Jesus Christ. Oop, I shouldn't say that. I don't know why it's so slow. Okay. So Robert Alter says a certain place. So that's what we saw there. So though archaeological evidence indicates that Bethel had been a cultic site for the Canaanites centuries before the patriarchs, this pagan background, as Nahum Sarna argues, is entirely occluded. The site is no more than an anonymous place where Jacob decides to spend the night. Repetition of a term is usually a thematic marker in biblical narrative, and is noteworthy that that place occurs 6 times in this brief story. In part, this is the tale of the transformation of an anonymous place through vision into Bethel, house of God. Okay? So one of the stones of the place. Uh-oh, it's freezing. There we go. Second, we go back here. Okay, so one of the stones of the place, that's in verse 11. There's scant evidence elsewhere of a general and uncomfortable ancient Near Eastern practice of using stones as pillows. Rashi, followed by some modern scholars, proposes that the stone is not placed under Jacob's head, but alongside it as a kind of protective barrier. So we actually mentioned that. One of the few times I might actually agree with Rashi. The stone by which Jacob's head rests as he dreams his vision will become the pillar, the commemorative or cultic marker, matzeva, at the end of the story. J.P. Fockelman, 1975, astutely notes that stones are Jacob's personal motif. From the stone at his head to the stone marker, then the stone upon the well he will roll away, and the pile of stones he will set up to mark his treaty with Lavan. Okay. Okay, it's freezing up again. Come on, you. Okay, a ramp. A ramp. Okay. The Hebrew term occurs only here. Maybe there are other windows, or if I close them? Let me close these windows. Let's see if it makes a difference. 1 second. Okay. Does make a bit of a difference. Okay, the Hebrew term occurs only here, although its etymology is doubtful. If that's the case, maybe I need to close other windows as well. I don't think so. It's not taking up a lot. Okay. So a ramp. So what is he talking about? Verse 12. Okay, so he's translating. So he translates it not as a ladder, but as a ramp. Now that's interesting because usually when Robert Alter makes a translation like that, there's a good reason for it. So in modern Hebrew, the word for ladder is sulam. Sulam is a ladder, but here he's mentioning that it's a ramp. Okay, let's read what he has to say about that. The Hebrew term occurs only here. Although the etymology is doubtful, the traditional rendering of ladder is unlikely. As has often been observed, the references to both its top reaching the heavens and the gate of the heavens uses phrases associated with the Mesopotamian ziggurat, if you know what that is. And so the structure envisioned is probably a vast ramp with terraced landings. There's a certain appropriateness in the Mesopotamian motif, given the destination of Jacob's journey. Jacob, in general, is represented as a border crosser, a man of liminal, whatever the hell that means, experiences. I think I know what that word means. Here, then, in his return trip, when he's confronted by Lavan, and in the nocturnal encounter at the fort of Yabok, which we'll get to. Okay, so basically, he's saying, okay, it's a ramp because these are phrases that are associated with the ancient ziggurat. Let's look at a ziggurat for a second. So that's a typical diagram of a ziggurat. This was a common ancient Mesopotamian altar, or more than an altar, I should say, cultic, worship site for their gods. And they're found in many different places, or remains of them are found in many different places in Mesopotamia. So, okay. Let's go on. So 13. Oh, it is working a little bit better now. What happens if I close this? But I don't want to close that. Let's leave that one open. Close Google. Okay. And verse 13, did we get up to 13 yet? Yes, we did. The Lord was poised over him. The syntactic reference of over him is ambiguous, and the phrase could equally be construed to mean on it. i.e. on the ramp. Okay? That's speaking about this. Hine Yahweh nitzav alau. Yeah, I always understood that to mean the ramp or the ladder. So let's see. He says the word sulam never appears anywhere else. Is that so? Yeah, wow. I never realized that before. Hmm. Okay. Okay, and your seed shall be like the dust of the earth. God, in effect, offers divine confirmation of Isaac's blessing. Verses 3 and 4 in language that is more vivid, indeed hyperbolic. Okay, so that's in verse 3. He's talking about here. Okay. Okay. Took the stone, set it on a pillar. So we didn't get up to that yet. We're going to get up to that. So Isaac has his dream. He has the stones around his head. Okay, the stone in Bethel. Verse 18, Vayishkem Yaakov b'boker vayikach et ha'even asher sam merashotav. Vayisem ota matzeva vayitzok shemen al rosha. So he took one of the stones. So he gathered stones around his head. Maybe as a barrier, and now he takes one of those stones and he sets it up as a matzeva. Matzeva is usually translated as a standing stone or a standing pillar, and then he pours oil on top of it, olive oil on top of it. Okay. Wayikrat Shema Makom Ha'u Bet El, and he called the name of this place Bet El, the house of God. Wa Ulam Luz Shema Ir La Rishona, and meanwhile, and indeed, it had been called, the city had been called Luz previously, at first. Okay, so we should add now to our list of the patriarchal journeys. I guess we could start it right here. So verse 11, actually, I think we'll do it this way. So we'll just put this as 28:11, and Bethel. So let's just put this one as Bethel. Bethel. So we can leave this comment the same. Yaakov leaves Beersheba after Esav intends to kill him, and Isaac wants him to find, and Isaac wants to, okay. And comes upon this place. I'll put it like that, and it comes upon this place. Okay. Does he set up an altar here? So it's not technically an altar, but it's a standing stone. So I'll put it as a Y with a, oops. See, he sets up, so put it like this. He sets up a standing stone and anoints it. Okay, good. Okay, so that's that. That's Genesis 28:11. And so now, verse 20. Wa'idar Yaakov neder lemor im yeh Elohim imadi u'shimrani בדרך הזה אשר אנוכי הולך ונתן לי לחם לאכול ובגד ללבוש ושבתי בשלום אל בית אבי והיה יהוה לי לאלוהים והאבן הזאת אשר שמתי מצבה יהיה בית אלוהים B'chol asher titen li, aser asrenu lach. So basically, Yaakov makes a vow that if Yahweh looks after him on his journey, he's going out to his father and mother's family, and gives him sustenance, bread to eat, clothes to wear, and brings him back in peace to his father's house, then he will accept Yahweh as his God. And this stone that I've placed here as a standing stone will be the house of God. And I will tithe, basically, to paraphrase, I'll tithe all that I make to God. So this will be a house of God. Again, to me, this language implies, and this is near Jerusalem, this language implies to me that maybe, again, we're talking about the Temple Mount. We know that Isaac was almost sacrificed on what seems to be what later became the Temple Mount, because it says in the mountain of Moriah, and there are other hints there, and maybe this is that same place. I don't know. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 28. Let's read Robert Alter on that one. Took the stone set as a pillar. Cultic pillars, Jacob ritually dedicates this one as such by pouring oil over its top, were generally several feet high. If that is the case here, it would have required, as Gerhard von Rad notes, Herculean strength to lift the stone. We are then prepared for Jacob's feat with a massive weight of stone in the next episode. Okay. The name of the town had before been Luz. In fact, there is no indication of any town in the story, although Luz Bethel would have been familiar to Israelite audiences as a town and cultic center. Perhaps Jacob's vision is assumed to occur in the open in the vicinity of Bethel. So if it's in the vicinity of Bethel, then maybe it was actually on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. If the Lord will be with me, this is verse 20, the conditional form of the vow. If the other party does such and such, then I, on my part, will do such and such in return, is well attested elsewhere in the Bible and in other Near Eastern texts, but its use by Jacob has a characteristic peculiarity. God has already promised him in the dream that he will do all these things for him. Jacob, however, remains the suspicious bargainer or wrestler with words and conditions, just as he is a physical wrestler or heel grabber. He carefully stipulated conditions of sale to the famished Esau. He was leery that he would be found out when Rebekah proposed her stratagem of deception to him. Now he wants to be sure God will fulfill his side of the bargain before he commits himself to God's service, and later he will prove to be a sharp dealer in his transactions with his uncle Laban. See, I don't go for all this kind of stuff. Again, Jacob is just trying to survive in a world full of snakes, and he's the good guy. Okay, on this way I am going. The way replicates the mission of Abraham's servant in chapter 24 to find a bride among his kinfolk in Mesopotamia, but unlike the servant who crosses the desert in grand style with a revenue of camels and underlings, Jacob is fleeing alone on foot. In fact, it is a very dangerous journey. He will invoke an emblematic image of himself as a refugee and pedestrian border crosser in his reunion with Esau years later. For with my staff I crossed the Jordan. Okay. Very good. Okay. So that's Genesis 28. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? So we're supposed to go up to 32, actually the beginning of 32. So we have 29, 30, 31. We have a long ways to go. I'm going to take a break now for about 5 minutes. I need a little bit of a break. I'm going to grab some water, and we will continue then in about, let's say, 10 minutes or so. Put up a little bit of music. All right, let's see here. I've got to put this banner up. Resume shortly. This one goes up. And then we do this. I wish I had an engineer, so I don't have to deal with this. Okay.
כעמוד שבדרך לגשר, אף כחוט השדרה לאנוש. המציל והקשר, הוא הירדן הקדוש. להציל והציל והקשר, הוא הירדן הקדוש. שתי גדות לירדן, זו שלנו כן. שתי גדות לירדן, ירדן שלנו זו גם כן. אם ארצי דללה וקטונה, איש שלי ברשעת קיצה. מסתרת מים ישימונה, וירדן הירדן באמצע. מסתרת מים ישימונה, וירדן הירדן באמצע. שתי גדות לירדן, זו שלנו כן. שתי גדות לירדן, ירדן שלנו זו גם כן. שם ירדן לו משפע ועושר, בקרב בין נצרת ובני. כי דגלי דגל תורה ויושר, יטהר שתי גדות ירדני. כי דגלי דגל תורה ויושר, יטהר שתי גדות ירדני. שתי גדות לירדן, זו שלנו כן. שתי גדות לירדן, ירדן שלנו זו גם כן. שתי ידיים לך הקדשתי מולדת, שתי ידיים לנגד ומגן. אך ימיני המוגדת, אם אשכח את שמאל סיר לו כתיף לו ביד, אלוהים ליעקב בחרתנו, ותבחר את אפילי תליין, ותבחר אלוהים ליעקב בחרתנו, ותבחר את אפילי תליין. כאן חיים כאן המלך, ולבקה כל ארצנו תמיד, נו לעמק ברחוב התפארת, יתנשא גם מלך המילים. נוסענו בעמק ברחוב התפארת, יתנשא גם מלך המילים. כי אנחנו שדך נתן, נמות מהכל גדול, אלוהים לשלטון בחרתנו, הלבן וכחול ואדום, אלוהים לשלטון בחרתנו, הלבן וכחול ואדום.
יהודה נפלה, בדקה אש יהודה
Oh, shoot. I had the sound off the whole time. I can't believe it. My bad. It wasn't you. It was me, Phil. Darn, I hate when I do that, and it happens sometimes. That's why I wish I had an engineer to do all this stuff for me. Really sorry about that. Okay, all I can do is continue. Damn, that sucks. Maybe that's a sign. Well, I'll just go to the end of Genesis 29, and then I guess we'll end. Boy, and there were so many things that I said that I thought that were kind of important. All right, well, whatever. Verse 31, V'yar Yahweh ki sinu'a le'a wa yiftach et rachma v'rachel kara. So now Jacob starts becoming a father. 32, Watahar Leah, Wateled ben, Watikra Shimo, Reuven, Ki, Ara, Ki, Ra'a Yahweh, Be'ani'i, Ki, Eta, Ye'ehavani, Ye'ehavani, Ishi. Verse 33. Watahar Od, Wateled ben, Watomer Ki, Sham'a Yahweh, Ki Sinu'a Anochi, Wayiten Ligam et Ze, Watikra Shimo Shimon. So the first one is Reuven, based on Ra'a Yahweh Be'ani'i. Yahweh has seen my desperation, has seen my horrible situation, has seen my pain, maybe would be a good way of translating that. So the first one is God has seen my pain. That's Reuven. And the next one, Shimon, Ki Shema Yahweh, Ki Sinu'a Anochi. God has heard, has understood, has recognized that I'm the despised one, the two wives. And that's where we get the name Shimon from Shama, has heard or has understood. Verse 34. Watahar od wateled ben wat tomer ata hap'am yilaweh ishi elai. Ki yalaleti lo shlosha banim al ken kara shemo Lewi. Third one is Levi, Lewi. And that's because ta hap'am yilaweh. We'll just start here. Yilaweh ish elai. My husband will come close to me. ותחר עוד ותלד בן ותאמר אברהם אודה את יהוה על כן קרא שמו יהודה ותעמוד מלדת. So those are the first four sons. Uh-oh, the thing froze. Shoot. Here we go. Just have to wait. No, it's back. Are we back? No, we're not back. Darn it. Froze. Okay, it's just wait. It's not frozen anymore. This is now happening each study. I don't know why. It just decides sometime during the study to freeze, and there's nothing I can do about it. So we just gotta wait. Sorry about that, everyone. There's nothing I can do. Just gotta wait a minute or two. Oh, maybe I have to reinstall the entire operating system, but I can't do that. I have too much stuff. Maybe I can. I don't know. There's nothing I can do. I just gotta sit and wait. Okay, sitting and waiting. Okay, it's still doing it. I don't know what to say. I don't know why it suddenly decides to freeze up. I guess the only thing I can do is maybe quit, come back in. I'll give it another minute. Okay, now what is it doing? I guess we're back. Okay, I guess we're back. No, it has nothing to do with the satellite reception. It's something with Chrome. I think I just need a new computer, or I need to reinstall the operating system or something like that. Okay. Any rate, I think we're back. Let's do a sound check. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So those are the first four sons. That brings us to chapter 30. And then we get the birth of more sons to Yaakov, this time by concubines. But I think maybe, we'll go until another couple minutes. Okay. ותראה רחל כי לא ילדה ליעקב, ותקנא רחל באחותה, ותאמר אל יעקב, הבה לי בנים, ואם אין, מתה אנוכי. ויחר אף יעקב ברחל, ויאמר, התחת אלוהים אנוכי, אשר מנע ממך פרי בטן, ותאמר הנה אמתי בלחה, בוא אליה, ותלד על ברכי, ואי בנה גם אנוכי ממנה. Verse 4, 5. ותיתן לו את בלחה שפחתה. So out of desperation, now Rachel is going to give her maidservant, who was given to her by her father, Bilhah, to Yaakov as a concubine. שפחתה לאישה. ויבוא אליה יעקב. Verse 5, ותהר בלחה ותלד ליעקב בן. Verse 6 and 7. ותאמר רחל, דנני אלוהים וגם שמעה וקולי וייתן לי בן, על כן קראה שמו דן. So that's the fifth son, Dan. Verse 7, ותהר עוד ותלד בלחה שפחת רחל בן שני ליעקב. ותאמר רחל, נפתולי אלוהים נפתלתי עם אחותי, גם יכולתי ותקרא שמו נפתלי. So we have Dan and Naphtali. So those are the two. So now we're up to 6 sons for Yaakov. Verses 9 and 10. ותראה לאה כי עמדה מילדת ותיקח את זלפה שפחתה. So now Leah gets the same idea and gives Yaakov her concubine, her maidservant as a concubine to Yaakov. ותיתן אותה ליעקב לאישה. Verse 10. ותלד זלפה שפחת לאה ליעקב בן. ויאמר לאה בגד ותקרא את שמו גד. ותלד זלפה שפחת לאה בן שני ליעקב. ותאמר לאה באשרי כי ישארוני בנות ותקרא את שמו אשר. So we have Gad and Asher. So these are the ends of these. This is now going to be the end of the four sons of the concubines. So after the four sons of Leah, that's Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Then we have the four sons of the concubines. Okay, first of Zilpah, and that's going to be Dan and Naphtali. I'm sorry. First of Bilhah, and that's going to be Dan and Naphtali. And then of Zilpah, and that's going to be Gad and Asher. Verse 14. وَيَلَخْ رَؤُوبَن بِمَا قَصِيرٌ حِتِّيم وَيِمْصَى دو ضَعِيم بَصَدَى وَيَبَى אותם אל לאה אמו ותאמר רחל אל לאה תני נא לי מדודאי בנך. ותאמר לה המעט קחתך את אישי ולקחת גם את דודאי בני. ותאמר רחל לכן ישכב עמך הלילה תחת דודאי בנך. Verse 16, ויבוא יעקב מן השדה בערב ותצא לאה לקראתו ותאמר אלי תבוא כי שכרתיך בדודאי בני וישכב עמה בלילה הוא. One second. Okay. וישמע אלוהים אליה ותהר ותלה ליעקב בן חמישי. Verse 18. ותאמר לאה נתן אלוהים שכרי אשר נתתי שפחתי לאישי ותקרא שמו יששכר. ותהר עוד לאה ותלד בן שישי ליעקב. Verse 20. ותאמר לאה זבדני אלוהים אותי זבד טוב הפעם יזבלני אישי כי ילדתי לו שישה בנים ותקרא את שמו זבולון. So we have יששכר זבולון. מחר ילדה בת ותקרא את שמה דינה. So that's Dinah. We're going to see, of course, the story of Dinah later on. And then finally, Rachel gives birth in Genesis 30:22. ויזכור אלוהים את רחל וישמע אליה אלוהים ויפתח את רחמה. Oops. Verse 23. ותהר ותלד בן ותאמר אוסף אלוהים את חרפתי. God has rolled back my shame. Verse 24. Finally, she's given birth after all these years. Verse 24. ותקרא את שמו יוסף לאמור יוסף יהוה לי בן אחר. So his name is based on Yosef and Asaph. It's a play on words based on these two words. Okay. ויהי כאשר ילדה רחל את יוסף ויאמר יעקב אל לבן שלחני ואלך אל מקומי ולארצי. So now Jacob has 11 children. He wants to get out of here. He wants to go back to his father. Verse 26. תנה את נשי ואת ילדי אשר עבדתי אותך בהן ואליך כי אתה ידעת את עבודתי אשר עבדתיך. Verse 27. ויאמר אלהו לבן אם נא מצאתי חן בעיניך נחשתי ויברכני יהוה בגללך. So I'm trying to get the proper pronunciation, so sometimes I have to go a little bit slow with the words. Verse 28, Vayomer Nukvas Harcha Alai Wa Itena. Verse 29. So we see here that Lavan he uses how do you say it again in English? Divination. Right? Something that is later outlawed by the Torah. So here he claims that he used divination to find out that Yivaracheni Yahweh biglalecha, that God has blessed me because of you, he says to Yaakov. Okay, verse 29. Wayomer elau ata yad'ata et asher avadticha wa et asher haya miknecha iti. Verse 30. Ki ma'at asher haya lecha lefanai wa yifrotz larov wa yivarech Yahweh otcha לרגלי ואתה מתי אעשה גם רם אנוכי לביתי. So Yaakov says, when am I going to build up my own house? I've made you rich, now I have to build myself up. Verse 31, ויאמר מה אתן לך? ויאמר יעקב לא תיתן לי מאומה אם תעשה לי הדבר הזה אשובה אראה שונאך שמור. So Yaakov is now going to make a deal with Lavan where he ends up deceiving Lavan. So he deceived his father, really deceived Esau, and now he's going to deceive Lavan. So Yaakov definitely, and he was deceived by Lavan. So there's a lot of deception going on. But again, Yaakov is the innocent one. He's just among all the snakes around him. 32. And I think that teaches us an important lesson, that being a good innocent person doesn't mean being a sucker. Okay? עבור בכל צונך היום, הסר משם כל שא נקוד ותלו, וכל שא חום בכבשים ותלו ונקוד בעזים וחיה שכרי. Verse 33. וענתה בי צדקתי ביום מחר כי תבוא על שכרי לפניך כל אשר איננו נקוד ותלו בעזים וחום בכבשים גנוב הוא איתי. So he's gonna use genetics to find out what his payment is. Verse 34, but he's then gonna enlist the help of God, shall we say. Verse 34, ויאמר לבן הן לו יהי כדבריך. And Lavan agrees. Verse 35. ויסר ביום ההוא את התיישים. I think we have that on our list. Just make sure. Yes, we do. He goats. העקודים והתלויים ואת כל העזים הנקודות והתלויות כל אשר לבן בו וכל חום בכבשים וייתן ביד בניו. Verse 36. וישם דרך 3 ימים בינו ובין יעקב ויעקב רואה את צאן לבן הנותרות. So now he's going to separate out all of these marked ones. ויקח לו יעקב מקל לבונה or livne. So I guess that's going to be the same as livona, which is frankincense. I'm sorry. It's not frankincense. Livona is frankincense. Livne, poplar. לך ולוז וערמון ויפצל בהם פצולות לבנות מחשוף הלבן אשר על המקלות. Verse 38. ויסר את המקלות אשר פצל barahatim, bashikatot, bashikatot. Hamayim asher ta'vona has'on lishtot lanochach has'on uye hamna bivo'an lishtot. Verse 39. Wayehemu has'on el hamaklot. Wa teladna has'on akudim nikudim wa tiluim. Verse 40. Wa kivasim ifrid Yaakov wa yiten bnei has'on el akod wachol hum bas'on lavan wayashet lo and darim levado velo shatam al s'on lavan. Verse 41. Haya bechol yacham has'on המקושרות ושם יעקב את המקלות לעיני השעון ברחתים ליחמנה במקלות. Verse 42 and 43, and we'll end after that. ובעטיף השעון לא ישים והיה העטופים ללבן והקישורים ליעקב. Verse 43. In other words, to make a long story short, if we had more time, we'd go into the whole thing. But by doing this, Yaakov was able to make himself very wealthy. Okay, we're going to end it there. Oh, I was supposed to get up to 32.3, so we'll do that. Oh, 32.3, and we're in 30. That's it. We're going to end it for today. That's all. We'll pick it up next week. I thank you all for joining me. It's been a long study as usual, and I think we're going to end it here. So I thank you all for joining me again. Wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. I'm not going to do music because it's getting late here, and I'm just going to end it. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, everyone.